Good evening and welcome to Russell Heritage Golf. Today, well, we're talking about the hips, and that's the theme very much on the playlist of this week's channel. My opinion, if you can move the hips well, then you'll actually be surprised how much the hips influence how your golf swing looks and how much it can influence every part of your golf swing. See, most of our rotation comes around the spine and the pelvis, right? So if you can move those parts of your golf swing well, then generally speaking, you're going to have a pretty decent golf swing itself. Yesterday's video was incredibly simple, and it was literally just the simplicity of the idea that you want to get into the habit of a free movement in terms of your hips. It was as simple as placing a cane through your belt line and trying to keep it horizontally placed. For many golfers, that would have felt very, very easy. For some golfers, it might have been a surprise. See, a lot of people don't feel the difference between a slide and a rotation, and they feel that it's exactly the same thing. And that's the theme on today's lesson as well. What I've got here is I've got a bar, and the main reason why I'm using this instead of just sticking a cane in the ground is that so you guys can see it more comfortably from the video. Obviously you wouldn't have access to something like this unless you've knocked something up, but sticking a cane around hip height is suffice for what you need out of today's video. See, if we went back to the simplicity of the idea of just turning the hips and the shoulders in the backswing, and I put my feet together, you can see the way that the bar is against my right hip, okay? And as I create a rotation, space obviously starts to materialize. And that's basically today's video. So once I'm in my posture, if I turn the pelvis right in the backswing position, my hip bone moves further away from the bar itself. That's part one of this exercise, right? A lot of golfers will be surprised that they actually move on to the leg itself, right? So even though this doesn't necessarily look like a massive slide, it's pretty much the same thing. If you end up putting too much weight, shall we say, on the kind of ball and socket joint within your hip to your leg, it basically means you'll have an inability to separate, which means that then you're going to be forced, with literally no choice because of the way that we're designed anatomically, to slide. And then you're going to get stuck. And I see this all the time with the lessons that I have. So that's why we're trying to break this down step by step. We've started with a very simple exercise. Today we're just evolving it slightly, but we're concentrating on the backswing. The idea is that once in posture, you'll introduce a sense of knee flex, which helps you put pressure in towards the floor. And then basically you are going to turn the pelvis or turn your hip so that your trail hip moves further away from its original position. Hence the reason why you need something there. You can do it in a mirror, it doesn't matter. The only way that you're going to get this wrong, to be honest with you, is if you straighten the trail leg. But if you straighten the trail leg, what you're going to find is that you're going to lose the sense of weight pressure that you're putting in towards the ground. See, one of the things that we see with professional golfers is that some golfers look like they straighten the legs, some golfers look like they create more flexion in the backswing relative to the people that straighten it. To be honest, a lot of it is from perspective in terms of where you're standing anyway, right? So the guys that create more hip rotation and the girls that create more hip rotation, their leg will start to look more straight. The point is that as you get your setup, the weight will be relatively evenly distributed. As you start to turn, eventually the weight will start to progress more onto the trail side. As long as you keep this leg bent and you keep turning, then eventually you're going to feel a considerable amount of pressure building underneath that trail side. And from the face-on perspective is where I want you to concentrate at the moment. And basically, you don't want to be straightening the leg, which you'll know if it's wrong because you won't get a sense of weight pressure. And also you don't want to be positioning weight on the leg because you'll see because there's no space materialized. Plus from here, like I explained earlier, you're pretty much stuck. From here, well, like yesterday's exercise, you should have freedom to wiggle your hips around. And that would be a really important movement that you're able to possess. The last thing that we just need to discuss very briefly is that as I turn my hips have very little rotation on their own. So as you can see, as I continue to turn my hips, say to anywhere between 40 to 60 degrees of rotation, depends on the golfer, then you can see the way my leg, so the upper part of my right leg would have to point outward. So relative to the camera, it's now pointing towards you. As I turn back, it's now pointing outward. As long as the hip rotation is at a greater rate of rotation than where the upper part of the leg is pointing, then you're fine. Okay, so what you don't want to do in the golf swing is you don't want to flare this foot out and then try and turn massively, because what will happen is there'll never be any resistance created under the foot because everything is pointing at the same direction. So as long as this stays perpendicular and you keep this flexed and you turn the pelvis into the leg on the backswing like so, then you're going to be absolutely fine. And this is a really important thing to do. And don't underestimate, like I've done on the videos of deliberate practice, and I say to a lot of people, just because you can do this, you know, in front of the mirror doesn't mean it will instantaneously happen when you go down the driving range. So take your time with this exercise, because the backswing is where the majority of amateur golfers go wrong. Take your time with this, work on this exercise in front of the mirror until you can get the right sort of sense of weight pressure building and all the rest of it. And then from there we can start to talk about the transition and how the hips would start to work at impact and beyond. Really, really important video this one is. It truly is really important that you understand these basic things. Then when you're ready, you start to film your golf swing. You might draw a line on the actual trail hip, and then by the time you swing up to the top, you should start to move behind it. If you are to hit golf balls, that's absolutely fine, maybe with a cane. That's a little bit too invasive in terms of how I might collide it with my arms on the way down, but it's something that I'm suggesting that maybe you want to do at home with these sort of exercises so that you can feel what is inevitably right and wrong. Hopefully you enjoy the video. It will make a massive difference if you can get this backswing correct. We can start working on the transition, work hard on it. Always appreciate one of those. Remember, it's free to press the subscribe button. If you're going to do that, you might as well press the little bell icon, because it means you'll receive notifications every time a new video comes out. I'll catch up with you guys again tomorrow.